January 23rd, 2026. Donald Trump stood aboard Air Force One, flying back from Davos. A reporter asked about Iran. His answer was 4 words: "We have an armada." Not a ship, not a carrier group. An armada heading directly toward the Persian Gulf, toward Iran. The USS Abraham Lincoln, one of the most powerful warships on Earth. A floating city of 5,000 sailors, 60 fighter jets. Tomahawk cruise missiles capable of reaching any target inside Iranian territory within minutes. And it wasn't traveling alone. A full carrier strike group, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, cruisers, submarines, additional air defense systems repositioning across the Middle East, the largest American military buildup in the region since last summer. Since the United States helped Israel bomb Iran's nuclear facilities into rubble, Tehran noticed immediately. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, not a press release, not a tweet, an op-ed in an American newspaper addressed directly to the American public. Quote, "Our powerful armed forces have no qualms about firing back with everything we have." Quote, "An all-out confrontation will certainly be ferocious." That's not confidence. That's fear dressed up as bravado. When your foreign minister writes an essay begging Americans to understand the consequences of war, you're not projecting strength. You're projecting desperation. And Iran has every reason to be desperate. Let's rewind 26 days. December 28th, 2025. Tehran's Grand Bazaar, one of the oldest markets in the Middle East. Thousands of shops, millions of visitors, the economic heartbeat of Iran's capital. Shopkeepers closed their doors, not for holiday, not for renovation, in protest. The Iranian rial had collapsed. Again, inflation had climbed past 42%. Prices for basic goods had doubled in months. Families who had savings watched those savings become worthless. And they blamed the government. The protests started small, a few hundred merchants, some chanting, some signs. Within 72 hours, they had spread to every major city in Iran: Isfahan, Shiraz, Mashhad, Tabriz. By January 8th, the demonstrations had become the largest uprising since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. The regime's response was immediate and brutal. Internet blackout. Complete. Total. The most comprehensive communications shut down in Iranian history. Security forces deployed to every major intersection. Basij militia, Revolutionary Guards, plainclothes agents with batons and live ammunition, and the killing began. The Iranian government eventually admitted that 3,117 people died. They called most of them terrorists. Human rights organizations put the real number at over 5,000. 5,000 protesters, dead in the streets. In less than 3 weeks, 27,000 more were arrested, dragged from their homes, thrown into prisons already overflowing with political prisoners, and the regime wasn't done. Reports emerged that 800 protesters had been sentenced to death, mass executions planned. A message to anyone who dared challenge the Islamic Republic. This is where Donald Trump entered the picture. January 11th, the White House. Trump had been watching the protests, posting messages of support to Iranian demonstrators, encouraging them to keep fighting. But when the execution report surfaced, his tone changed. Quote, "If you hang those people, you're going to be hit harder than you've ever been hit." Not a diplomatic statement, not a carefully worded condemnation, a direct threat of military force. The media dismissed it. They always do. Trump is bluffing, they said. He doesn't want another war. He'll back down like he always does. Except Donald Trump doesn't bluff. Not about this. 6 months earlier, in June 2025, Israel launched a 12-day war against Iran. And the United States didn't just watch. American warplanes joined the assault. American missiles struck Iranian nuclear facilities. Natanz, Fordo, Isfahan, sites that Iran had spent decades building. Sites they believed were invulnerable, reduced to craters in a matter of hours. Trump had proven he would strike Iran. He had already done it. So when he threatened to hit them again over the executions, Tehran had a choice: call his bluff and risk annihilation, or back down. They backed down. January 15th, Trump announced that the executions had been canceled. Quote, "I stopped 837 hangings. Would have been dead, every one of them, mostly young men." Iran's prosecutor general immediately denied it, called Trump arrogant, said the judiciary doesn't take orders from foreigners. But the executions didn't happen. 800 people are alive today because Donald Trump made a threat and Iran believed him. The media barely covered it. No headlines about Trump saving lives, no analysis of how deterrence actually works, just silence or dismissal. But Trump wasn't finished with Iran. Not even close. January 12th. Another announcement. Effective immediately, any country doing business with Iran would face a 25% tariff on all goods exported to So. The United States. Read that again. Not sanctions on Iran. Sanctions on anyone who trades with Iran. China buys 80% of Iranian oil. Under this policy, Chinese goods would face an additional 25% tariff on top of the 35% already in place. Turkey, Iran's second largest trading partner, 25%. India, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, 25%, 25%, 25%. Trump wasn't just squeezing Iran, he was forcing the entire world to choose. Do business with Tehran or do business with America. No country can afford to lose access to the American market. Not China, not anyone. The Chinese embassy condemned the policy, called it illegal, warned of consequences. But here's what they didn't do. They didn't say they would keep buying Iranian oil regardless, because they can't afford to. Iran's economic lifeline was already fragile. Now Trump was strangling it. The rial fell further, inflation accelerated. The protests had been crushed, but the underlying crisis remained, and it was getting worse by the day. Then came the Armada. January 21st. Reports emerged that the USS Abraham Lincoln had changed course. It had been conducting exercises in the South China Sea, standard patrol operations. Now it was heading west, through the Strait of Malacca, into the Indian Ocean, toward the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon wouldn't confirm the destination. They didn't need to. Everyone knew where it was going. 2 days later, Trump confirmed it himself, on Air Force One, looking directly into the cameras. Quote, "We're watching Iran. We have a lot of ships going in that direction, just in case. Just in case." 3 words that carry more weight than 100 diplomatic statements. The United States had aircraft carriers in the region before the June strikes. The buildup followed the same pattern, the same positioning, the same ominous silence from the Pentagon followed by sudden, devastating action. Iran remembered what happened last time. Their nuclear facilities destroyed, their air defenses overwhelmed, their military humiliated on the world stage. And now the same ships were returning. General Abolfazl Shikarchi, spokesman for Iran's armed forces, responded with threats of his own. Quote, "Trump knows that if a hand of aggression is extended toward our leader, we will not only sever that hand, we will set their world on fire and leave them no safe haven in the region." Strong words, but words are all Iran has left. Their economy is collapsing. Their people are revolting. Their nuclear program is in ruins. Their regional allies have been systematically dismantled by Israel over the past 2 years. Hezbollah is crippled. Hamas is destroyed. The Assad regime in Syria is gone. The network of proxies that Iran spent 40 years building has been shattered. And now an American armada is sailing toward their coastline. This is what the end of Iranian power looks like, not with a single dramatic explosion, but with slow, methodical, relentless pressure applied from every direction simultaneously. Military, economic, diplomatic, psychological. Trump isn't trying to start a war with Iran. He's trying to end the Islamic Republic without one. And as of January 26th, 2026, it's working. Now, I will break down exactly what Trump wants from Iran, why the regime cannot survive much longer, and what happens next in the most dangerous standoff since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Islamic Republic of Iran has survived for 47 years. It survived a revolution, an 8-year war with Iraq, decades of sanctions, assassinations, cyber attacks, internal uprisings. Every American president since Jimmy Carter has tried to contain Iran, some through diplomacy, some through pressure, some through both. None of them succeeded. Iran built a nuclear program anyway. Iran built a network of proxy militaries across the Middle East anyway. Iran became the dominant regional power anyway. Until now. Donald Trump is doing something no president before him attempted. He's not trying to contain Iran. He's trying to collapse it. And the strategy has 3 pillars: economic strangulation, military intimidation, and regime destabilization. Let's start with the economy. Iran's GDP is approximately $360 billion. That sounds substantial until you compare it to its adversaries. The United States, $28 trillion. Iran's entire economy is roughly 1% the size of America's. But even that number is misleading, because most of Iran's revenue comes from one source, oil. Iran produces approximately 3 million barrels per day. 80% of that goes to China. Without Chinese purchases, the Iranian economy doesn't slow down. It stops. Trump's 25% tariff on any country trading with Iran isn't just a policy, it's an ultimatum. China already faces 35% tariffs on goods entering America. Add another 25%, and Chinese exports become uncompetitive in the world's largest consumer market. Beijing has to choose cheap Iranian oil or access to American consumers. That's not a choice. That's a foregone conclusion. Chinese companies are already quietly reducing their Iranian exposure. Not publicly, not dramatically, but steadily. Shipment by shipment, contract by contract. Iran's oil revenue is drying up. Meanwhile, the rial continues its collapse. In 2016, $1 bought approximately 32,000 rials. Today, $1 buys over 700,000 rials on the black market. That's not inflation. That's economic disintegration. Ordinary Iranians can't afford basic necessities. Meat has become a luxury. Medicine is scarce. Electricity blackouts roll through major cities daily. The protests that erupted in December weren't about politics. They were about survival. People who can't feed their families don't care about ideology. They care about bread. The regime crushed those protests with overwhelming violence. 5,000 dead, 27,000 arrested, internet blackout for weeks. But you can't shoot your way out of economic collapse. The sanctions aren't going anywhere. The tariffs aren't going anywhere. The pressure isn't going anywhere. And Trump is just getting started. The second pillar, military intimidation. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group will arrive in the Persian Gulf within days. Some analysts believe it's already there. This is not a symbolic gesture. In June 2025, similar positioning preceded the joint U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. The Lincoln itself participated in those operations. Iran's military leadership remembers. They remember watching their air defenses fail. They remember Natanz burning. They remember the humiliation of being unable to respond effectively against Israeli and American air power. Iran has surface-to-air missiles. They have ballistic missiles. They have drones and fast attack boats and a large standing army. None of it matters against American carrier aviation. A single Nimitz-class carrier like the Abraham Lincoln carries more air power than most countries' entire air forces. The strike group surrounding it adds cruise missile capability, submarine warfare, and integrated air defense. Iran cannot win a conventional military engagement against this force. They know it. Trump knows it. Everyone knows it. So why send the Armada? Because the threat is the weapon. Trump doesn't need to bomb Iran again. He needs Iran to believe he will. And after June 2025, that belief is absolute. Every day that Carrier sits in the Persian Gulf, Iranian military planners lose sleep. Every flight operation, every missile drill, every submarine movement sends a message. We can hit you anytime we want. You cannot stop us. You cannot hide. That psychological pressure compounds the economic pressure, and it opens the door for the third pillar, regime destabilization. On January 13th, Trump posted a message directly to Iranian protesters on Truth Social. Quote, Iranian patriots, keep protesting. Take over your institutions. Save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. Quote, help is on the way. The State Department simultaneously issued an alert telling American citizens to leave Iran immediately. Trump wasn't just cheering from the sidelines, he was actively encouraging regime change from the inside. When asked what help is on the way meant, Trump smiled. Quote, you're going to have to figure that one out. The regime figured it out. They've seen this playbook before, in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq. American presidents expressing support for protesters, followed by no-fly zones, followed by airstrikes, followed by regime collapse. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, responded by posting an image on social media, a crumbling statue with Trump's likeness. Quote, the tyrants and oppressors of the world, such as Pharaoh and Nimrod, when they were at the peak of their pride, were overthrown. This one, too, will be overthrown. That's not the language of a confident leader. That's the language of a man who sees the walls closing in, and the walls are closing in. Iran's regional proxy network has been systematically destroyed over the past 2 years. Hezbollah, once the most powerful non-state military force in the Middle East, its leadership decapitated, its weapons stockpiles depleted, its fighters demoralized after the war with Israel. Hamas, destroyed in Gaza, its military wing annihilated, its political leadership scattered or dead. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Iran's most important Arab ally. The land bridge connecting Tehran to Hezbollah collapsed. The Houthis in Yemen, still active but increasingly isolated, unable to project power beyond their borders. For 40 years, Iran used these proxies to threaten Israel, intimidate Gulf Arab states, and project power without direct confrontation. That network is gone. Iran is alone, economically strangled, militarily surrounded, diplomatically isolated, internally unstable, and now Trump is offering them one way out. Negotiation. On January 23rd, the same day he announced the Armada, Trump said something else. Quote, Iran does want to talk, and we'll talk. This is the pattern. Maximum pressure followed by an off-ramp. Trump did the same thing with North Korea, threatened fire and fury, moved military assets, imposed crushing sanctions, then offered negotiations. He did the same thing with China, tariff escalation after tariff escalation, then a phone call, then a deal. He did the same thing with Europe over Greenland, threatened tariffs, threatened military options, then met with NATO Secretary General Rutte, then announced a framework agreement. The threats aren't random, they're leverage. Trump wants Iran at the negotiating table, but not as an equal partner, as a defeated adversary accepting terms. What does Trump want from Iran? First, complete dismantlement of the nuclear program. Not a pause, not inspections, dismantlement. Every centrifuge, every enrichment facility, every stockpile of fissile material, gone. Second, end of support for regional proxies. No more weapons to Hezbollah, no more funding for militia groups, no more destabilization of neighboring countries. Third, normalized relations with Israel and Gulf Arab states, full diplomatic recognition, trade agreements, security cooperation. Fourth, guarantees against terrorism and assassination plots, including against American officials. These are not minor concessions. These are fundamental changes to everything the Islamic Republic has stood for since 1979. The regime cannot accept these terms and survive. Their entire legitimacy is built on opposition to America and Israel, on exporting revolution, on nuclear ambiguity. But they cannot refuse these terms and survive either. The economy will collapse. The people will revolt again. And this time, American aircraft might not stay offshore. This is what strategic submission looks like. Not invasion, not occupation, not nation building. Pressure so overwhelming that the target has no choice but to surrender. Some experts predict the regime will hold on. They've survived before. They'll survive again. But they've never faced this combination of pressures simultaneously. Economic, military, internal, regional. Something has to break. Either Khamenei accepts humiliating terms that destroy his legacy and possibly trigger a hardliner coup, or he refuses and watches his economy implode while American warships patrol his coastline. Or the Iranian people rise up again. And this time, they don't stop. Trump is betting on the third option. That's what help is on the way means. That's what the Armada means. That's what the tariffs mean. He's not trying to negotiate with this regime. He's trying to create the conditions for its replacement. And unlike previous American presidents who spoke about democracy in Iran and did nothing, Trump has demonstrated he will act. He bombed their nuclear facilities. He killed their top general in his first term. He crippled their proxies. He strangled their economy. The regime knows this isn't theater. That's why they're terrified. The media will tell you Trump is reckless, dangerous, pushing the world toward war. They said the same thing before North Korea came to the negotiating table. They said the same thing before China signed a trade deal. They said the same thing before Europe backed down on Greenland. They're saying it again now, and they'll be wrong again. Because Donald Trump understands something his critics don't. In international relations, perceived weakness invites aggression. Perceived strength compels submission. Iran thought America was weak. They thought they could outlast the pressure. They thought the Armada was a bluff. They're not thinking that anymore. The aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln is real. The Tomahawk missiles are real. The economic collapse is real. And the choice facing Iran's leadership is very simple. Negotiate now, on Trump's terms, or watch everything they've built for 47 years disappear. The Armada is waiting.